In this video, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about Blender modifiers for hard surface modeling for Blender 4.1 and above. Let's go. Now, this is a video for beginners, so let me first explain what are modifiers. Modifiers are tools in Blender that allow you to add changes to your models and are procedural, which means you can turn them off, change them, revert, etc. You can also stack them if you want, like for example, stack in mirrors or, stack in subdivision, surface modifier, etc. Right? Now, it's really important to understand that you don't really need all the modifiers in Blender. There are a lot of them. You just need few. And I'm going to explain this to you, which ones are important, how to use them, and what they do. Another thing is that if you're really new to Blender and you want to learn hard surface modeling as soon as possible and as efficiently as possible, I highly recommend you grab our free course, which is called Jumpstart Hard Surface for Blender. It has nearly 100,000 students right now, and it's a fantastic way of getting started. In only a few hours, you can master the UI, the basics, the hard surface modeling, the texturing, the rendering, the whole jazz. The course is free. It's on our website. Link is in the description. Go ahead and grab it. Now, let's get on with the video. So in order to see modifiers in Blender, you need to add something to the scene. So let's just press Shift-A. Go to mesh and then the cube, and I can see that on the right hand side menu you got this wrench, and this one denotes modifiers. So when you go in here, you can actually see modifiers here, and there's a modifier menu, which is a new feature of Blender 4.1 and above. Now I prefer the old menu. You can actually get an add-on called old modifier menu for Blender 4.1 and above. It's free. You can get it on GitHub or Gumroad, I can't remember, but just Google it and you'll find it. Now let me tell you which modifiers are important and which modifiers you should be focusing on when you're starting with Blender, especially hard surface, because honestly the rest is just a fluff. So when you look at all these modifiers here, it's very overwhelming because there are quite a lot of them. But like I said, you're not going to be using 90% of them or more, okay? So first of all, the most important modifier is going to be Auto Smooth. This is a new thing in Blender 4.1. If you're going to go to Blender 4.0 and before, there is no Auto Smooth modifier. It was just an option. Now, what this modifier does basically tells Blender which angles are sharp and which angles should be smooth. So if I'm going to edit in here on the normals and add smooth by angle, then you can see here that any angle above 30 degrees, it's going to be sharp. Which means if I'm going to grab this cube here and I'm going to go to edge mode. Now, by the way, I'm using machine tools to go to edit menu. You're going to be pressing tab and pressing 2 for an edge. But I highly recommend you get machine tools because it's a fantastic add-on. It's going to save you a lot of time. The link is also in the video description. Now, before I show you this, let me just remove cavity here, turn it off, because cavity actually creates kind of highlights on edges. So if I go here and turn it off, you'll see that it's going to disappear. This highlight looks like a bevel. So let's go to edit mode now to edge. Grab this edge. We're going to split it with Ctrl B to create a chamfer. Grab this one, press G and X, and move it in here on the X axis. Now this edge is still looks like it's sharp, but the reason why it looks like it's sharp is because we didn't turn this ignore sharpness option, which basically smoothes the mesh out, okay? So if I do that, every single angle below 30 degrees is going to be smoothed out. Okay, so averaged, and everything above is going to be sharp, which is why we get these sharp edges here. So when I'm going to turn the cavity back on, right, you see that we got these nice highlights here, right, but this one is kind of meh, okay. And if I'm going to drop this edge down here to increase the angle, right, up to 30 degrees, suddenly this edge is going to pop. Boom, see that? That means that Auto Smooth catches this edge and creates a sharp edge, visually here in our display. That's what this modifier does. So when you model in Blender, you need to use this modifier for every single mesh, unless you are working with Subdivision modifier, okay? Because for hard surface workflow, you want these sharp edges to be well defined, and you want to be able to add bevels to them later on, and you want them to be crisp because they define the the hard surface shape, right? So that's the modifier number one. Now, another thing is that you should keep this modifier at the bottom of a stack. And I'm going to talk about order of modifiers in a bit. It's important to understand that Auto Smooth, or this smooth by angle, which is the same thing, should be basically at the bottom of the stack. Okay, somewhere near weighted normal modifier, about which we're going to be talking in a minute, because order of modifiers in Blender is super important, and if you're going to mess it up, shit's going to hit the fan, and I'm going to show you this also in a minute. So now another modifier that you want to probably add to your model, and you're going to be using it quite a lot, is a bevel modifier. Bevel modifier is going to actually define these edges really well. So if I turn off the cavity, which kind of fakes the the highlights on edges, it's simply very useful for modeling because it helps you to see this the design language and shape of a model. Because you see here, you can't really see the on a specific angle, can't see the edge, this border between these two faces. And when you can't see that, it's really difficult to model because you can't feel the shape, right? So you need to turn this on. I always have it on. And if you want to learn actually how to set the UI for Blender, go ahead and watch my video. I posted one quite recently. It's also the same beginner series, so you can easily find it. So let me now add the bevel modifier. So we're going to go here to generate, and we're going to go to bevel. Now by default, you can see that it creates some kind of a nasty shape here. And the reason for that is mainly because we need to change the order of modifiers, like I told you. So you need to move this above the auto smooth. That's one. Then we're going to have to change the number of segments to 3 to make it a bit more, smooth. And also hold shift to slow down the movement and simply change the amount, which technically should be size. I don't know who the fuck named it like this. But basically it should be a size of a bevel, okay, or width, whatever. And there you go. Right, now you can see, maybe you can see that we have a little bit of a weird shading here on the side of this face. It's not really perfectly flat. And the reason is because Auto Smooth is trying to average these two faces, right, between this bevel in order to kind of accommodate the curvature. So if I'm going to toggle the visibility of a bevel in viewport, you see this shading going to disappear. To combat this problem, we need to add another modifier, which is called weighted normal. So go here to edit and add weighted normal. Now, weighted normal modifier has to be together with auto smooth at the very bottom of the stack. Let me show you now what happens if this weighted normal modifier gonna go above bevel. It's a complete disaster, right? So like I said before, order of modifiers is extremely important in Blender when you're modeling anything, okay? So we have now bevel, we have smooth by angle, and we have weighted normal. This is basically bread and butter of modeling in Blender. And another important modifier is going to be Boolean. The way to add Booleans in Blender is a little bit convoluted because you have to select a mesh, select another mesh, add modifier. It's fucking annoying. So what I want you to do now is I want you to go to Preferences and I want you to enable this modifier, which is called Bool tool. So go to Add-ons, Bool, click this box here, save preferences, and you're good to go. This will allow you to use numpad on the keyboard to quickly create booleans on your mesh. Now, if you don't have numpad on your keyboard, go ahead and get a fucking proper keyboard, because seriously. But you can also go to input and enable emulate numpad, all right? Now go ahead and watch my UI video because I explained a great deal about all these things over there, including your modifiers, how to set everything up. This whole Blender scene, you can have it set up the same way as I do, okay? All right, so moving on. So we have bevel, auto smooth, and weighted normals, right? Now we're gonna be adding Boolean modifiers. So in order to cut, your mesh, you need another mesh, right? So we're gonna add another cube, okay? We're going to scale this, and we're gonna GZ this, all right? And then GX here. And let's say we wanted to cut, let me just enable cavity because I can't work without this shit. There we go, that's better. So here what I want to do is I want to cut this cube, okay, with this cube. So what you want to do is select this cube, shift select this cube, and then Control minus on your keyboard. Now this will do three things. One, it's going to add Boolean modifier to your stack. Two, it's going to cut your cube. And three, it's going to turn your Boolean into a wireframe. So you can easily see through it, you can modify it, etc. So now, first of all, what you need to do, you need to arrange your modifiers in order, right? So let me explain. Do you see, for example, this bevel running on the mesh suddenly disappears here? It's been cut off. Why? Because you bevel first and then you Boolean. You need to do it the other way around. So first you Boolean, watch this. I'm going to move it, watch the bevel. Bam. Because you Boolean first, then you bevel what was Boolean out, then you add auto smooth, and then you apply weighted normals, and now everything is peachy. If you change the modifier order here, you're gonna get fucked, okay? This is really cool, and as a tip, additional tip I can give you is you can press M on the keyboard to create a new collection. You got collections here, and you can add it to cutter collection, all right? By the way, if you're using add-ons like Hardops and Box Cutter, this is all done automatically. You don't have to worry about it. So, you know, I always recommend you guys get these add-ons, and links to both add-ons are also in the video description. Now, what you can do is you can press Shift-2 to turn on and off the cutter collection. So if you have multiple cutters on your mesh, you can easily switch them on and off, right? Like I said, Box Cutter is going to create this automatically, so you don't have to worry about it. It's just, you know, saving a lot of time. Now, you can also modify this. So, you know, if you're going to go here, you can just play with this, add some chamfer, etc., right? And it's live. This is why I said that modifiers are procedural, because they are live on your mesh. I can move this, right, about to change the shape of it. I can rotate it. I can do whatever the hell I want, right? So that's the beauty of working with modifiers. So as long as these modifiers on the cube here are live, you can adjust them. Now, another interesting fact is that when you go to edit mode, right, you will see that there's a solid cube. Modifiers that are not applied are just an illusion. You can see the reflection of what they do on a solid mesh. But when you go to edit mode, you see the real mesh. And in our case, this mesh wasn't cut. If I apply this modifier here, and I can't do it in edit mode, so I have to go back to object mode and then go here and apply it. If I go now to edit mode, I can see the real mesh, which is actually a cutout in my mesh, because the modifier was applied. Do you see how it works? Now, you can apply all kinds of modifiers, but I urge you not to apply the bevel that runs all around your mesh, because if you do that, let me show you what happens. You will have a lot of tiny geometry on your mesh, and changing anything on this mesh without add-ons like Mesh Machine is virtually impossible. So never apply a modifier, a bevel modifier that highlights the edges. You know, like a tiny bevel running around all the edges. Don't apply that. Secondly, never apply auto smooth and never apply weighted normals. Just let it be. Even if you're exporting this mesh to OBJ file, you want to bring it to a, I don't know, to a substance painter, Marmoset toolbag to, you know, for baking textures or baking maps, or, you know, texturing in substance painter. You do not need to apply any of these. In our Game Master 2.0 course, we have a bevel modifier set to one segment. We have auto smooth, of course, but there was no modifier back then. And we have weighted normals. We export mesh as is. You don't have to touch it at all, right? So you don't have to worry about these modifiers completely. Just make sure they're in the right place. So now let's move on to other modifiers. So let me just Shift-2 to remove this. Now we have this shape, right? And let's say we wanted to, I don't know, create multiple shapes out of this. We can array this. So select that, go here, and I think it's under generate. Yeah, array. And now you can choose the axis on which you want to array. So now we're on the x-axis here. We can see that there's an offset 1. We don't want that. We want to go on y-axis, so we're going to switch it to 1 here. So now you can slide it here to adjust the distance, holding shift, and then you can also adjust the number of, the count of these objects in the array. And that's basically, you know, the very essence of arraying. You can of course stack these arrays. You can add another array modifier if you want to. So you can go to generate an array, and you can change it to, like, say, I don't know, z-axis. So go 0 here, right? And then 1 here, and now you're gonna have a double, you know, dual array. So you're gonna have array on x-axis and on z, and you can of course change them individually, and so on and so forth. So that's an array modifier. Now another modifier that's really important is gonna be Solidify modifier. So now with this mesh selected, let's just go to edit mode. So press tab and 3 in your case if you don't use machine tools. Select these two faces with shift and shift D to duplicate it. Then right mouse button to cancel. Now make sure that you understand one thing. These two faces, even though they're detached, they are part of the same mesh. You can see here you have a 1 and 1 cube. Now when I'm going to press P and separate selection, now we're going to have second cube, so second mesh. It's just basically a copy of the first cube. So go to object mode, and then we can grab this one and move it somewhere here. Now we can solidify it. Now we can go to modifier, we can go to deform, and should be somewhere here. Man, I really fucking hate this menu. It's such a garbage. They say type here. It's like, who the fuck wants to type? There you go. Just fucking. Who the fuck came up with this shit? Fucking hell. Anyway, so grab this Solidify modifier, and what you want to do is increase the thickness here, right? Either left or right. So you're gonna go in or out. So now you can see that the shading is messed up again, right? Clearly. So what you want to do is adjust the modifier in stack. So you want to move it above bevel, okay? Eventually you're gonna learn the order of these most essential modifiers, and you unfortunately in Blender Vanilla you have to do it by hand. If you're using hard ups, it's done automatically, which is why we all use hard ups. With this solidification modifier on, what you can do also is you can turn on even thickness, which will help to even the thickness along this mesh. It's slightly thinner here than here, so you can even it out by pressing that. In addition, if you're creating game assets and let's say you don't need the inner faces, you can click on the rim, which will remove this faceness inside here. And if you don't understand what this red color denotes, go to my UI setup video, because I explained there what it is and how to set it up. So let's sum it up. We have auto smooth modifier, bevel modifier, weighted normals. We have Boolean, we have array, we have solidification. You need 2 more: mirror modifier and subdivision modifier. So let's talk about mirror modifier, because that one is really important. So let's move this cube here on x-axis, okay, and let's go to, I think is generate. Yeah, this one, okay. This fucking menu, man. Now, in order to understand mirror in vanilla Blender, you need a PhD in what the fuck, but let me try to explain. In this case, what's happening is that mirror is mirroring this cube along the x-axis. The x-axis goes here, so it mirrors it along the x-axis across the origin point of this mesh. The origin point is inside here. You see that? This little white dot? So it's mirroring across this shape, so along the x-axis from left to right across the origin point. If I switch this, for example, to y-axis, fuck all will happen, because it basically mirrors from here to here. It's the same thing. Now, in order to mirror this across, this y-axis to the other side, you need something to mirror across. You, for example, could use an empty. So go here to Shift A menu, go to empty, plane axis, and then we can choose this axis, okay, as a mirror, sort of a point, like a pivot point. Click on this cube, select this mirror object, and select this empty, right? And now we need to actually mirror this along the x-axis. So we need to go back to x, right? And it's going to mirror across this empty along the x-axis. Let me show you how mirror works in hard ups and why we use it. So if I want to mirror this cube across itself, I press Alt X, click on the axis I want to mirror from, and it's super intuitive, right? If I want to mirror this object across this, point here, I can actually easily choose the point. So let me remove this mirror for a second, and I'm going to press Alt X. And then in the top here, you can see you have options. You can actually choose whatever you want to mirror across, and you're done. You don't have to add anything. The empty is going to be added by hard ups, and then you can actually use it to manipulate with this mirror, which is kind of cool. Now, it's also important where you place the mirror. I wouldn't place the mirror below smooth by angle and weighted normals. I would place it always above this, and you can place it underneath all the other modifiers, unless you don't want to include them. Well, let me explain what I mean. If I'm going to turn it off for a second, let me rebuild this mesh very quickly here, okay? So I'm going to grab these faces, and I'm going to, delete them. So delete faces, and then I'm going to go here, and I'm going to rebuild it very quickly with machine tools. There we go. And we're going to clean mesh. We can't clean mesh with hard ups because we don't have hard ups. Oh man, this is so limiting when you're working with our add-ons. There we go. So now let's say I wanted to cut this mesh one more time, okay? And I'm gonna scale this, move it somewhere here, and I'm gonna Boolean this again. So Control minus, right? Then now watch what happens when I'm gonna use a mirror, okay? So let's go here to generate mirror, right? Let me just move the shape a little bit to the right here. And we're gonna change the mirror direction from Y to from X to Y, and we're gonna flip it like this. So you need to enable bisect and flip. It's really confusing. Now you can see that we have a little bit of a shading problem here, so we need to move this mirror above these two modifiers. That's important, but when I do that, you see my Boolean disappeared because first we're mirroring and then we're Booleaning. So the Boolean has to be always above the mirror unless you don't want to include it. Make sense? So you Boolean, then you bevel, then you mirror, okay? And then you smooth by angle, and then you weight it normal. And that's the order of modifiers. And again, if you're doing this in vanilla Blender, every single fucking mesh, you gotta do it manually, which is really infuriating. Now let's talk about the last modifier, which is gonna be Subdivision Surface Modifier. I have a very simple kind of a plane extrusion here. So I just dropped the plane and extruded it to create this kind of a shape. And we wanted to smooth it out. We wanted to create like a really nice organic surface. The easiest way to do this is by using Subdivision Modifier, which is basically here. So go here to generate, here Subdivision Surface, and you can see that we got this kind of a surface being subdivided. Now when you're subdividing surfaces, a really good practice is to use quad topology, and preferably evenly spaced quad topology for best results. But let's go in a bit more deep into the subject, and we actually have a subdivision course that teaches you all you need to know about subdivision. So this mesh is nice and smooth, but we can increase the number of subdivisions. You can do it either here, you can press Ctrl 1, 2, 3 on the keyboard, but you can still see that it's not really smooth, it's still faceted. So what you want to do is you want to smooth the mesh. So instead of adding auto smooth, you want to right click and shade smooth, and this will produce this kind of a nice, lovely organic surface, okay? And of course, because it's a subdivision modifier, you can go to edit mode. So press tab and 1 for verts. You can select, whichever verts or faces you want, and you can keep moving them to deform this. And, subdivision is going to kind of average and smooth out all these areas. Then, of course, you can add stuff like loop cuts for creating creases, and sort of more angular transitions, etc. And that's how you build surfaces using Subdivision Surface in Blender. So that's it. That's all the modifiers that you need to know. The rest is just fluff. Honestly, if you're going to be modeling hard surface, 99.9% you're going to be using this modifier, nothing else. So if you're going to master these, you should be fine. Okay guys, well that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. Like I said, check out our free course, Jumpstart Hard Surface in Blender. It's fantastic for beginners. If you're a beginner, you're going to learn a shit ton about hard surface modeling, and you're going to give you a really nice kind of a head start in just a few hours. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.